Hi there, I'm Nafisa Latic, and this is Across the Balkans. And for the first time since the end of the Bosnian War, people are asking if the country could be heading towards armed conflict. The new international representative there certainly thinks so, with Christian Schmidt warning Bosnia faces its greatest existential threat of the post-war period. Fears reached a new level when Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik said he would withdraw the Serb entity Republika Srpska from state institutions and work towards full autonomy. Aksel Zaimovic reports from Sarajevo.
The state is being questioned by the political elites.
It's being called the deepest political crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina since the war ended in 1995. State institutions are in limbo, and with no solution to the deadlock on the immediate horizon. Some feel emboldened to resort to harsh rhetoric.
Ako dođe do toga da kažu NATO će nešto intervenisati, mi ćemo zatražiti pomoć naših prijatelja koji su nam rekli jasno, glasno da oni svoje prijatelje nikada ne ostavljaju na cjedilu.
Ko vam je to rekao?
Dovoljno što sam rekao.
And for the first time in ages, people are asking, could there be a new conflict?
We shouldn't underestimate the situation.
I am Aksel Zaimovic. I'm in the capital Sarajevo to find out what's plunging Bosnia into a state of chaos.
Zaoštrilo se, jes. Ove tri stranke se bore da ostanu.
This is Ekrem Muhic. He's a former engineer, now retired. He's among dozens of other retirees who come to this park in Sarajevo to play chess and chat politics.
Prije svega govorimo o korupciji, o kriminalu. Znači, njima je jedini način da ostanu, da zaoštre situaciju što više. Vamo nemamo ni parlamenta, ni vijeća ministara, ni koje kakvih institucija koje bi trebali raditi.
He's talking about political turmoil that threatens to break up the state. It started after Milorad Dodik, Bosnian Serb leader and member of the Bosnian presidency, unveiled a plan to pull out Republika Srpska from key institutions. The crisis began in July when the international community's representative to Bosnia made changes to the country's criminal code. It banned genocide denial. It was directed at the events of Srebrenica in 1995, often disputed and downplayed by Bosnian Serbs. Serb representatives responded by boycotting state institutions for months.
Ako oni misle da mogu da prijete nama sankcijama, onda mi možemo da kažemo da imamo pravo na našu političku odluku.
It didn't end there. Dodik now wants the Serb entity, Republika Srpska, out of Bosnia's armed forces, the top judiciary body, and tax administration. He seems likely to ban the judiciary and security and intelligence agencies from operating in Republika Srpska, and to replace these bodies by Serb-only agencies by the end of November. A move seen as a serious violation of the constitution.
All the actions he has undertaken so far are unconstitutional. But what he's trying to change the reality on the ground, hoping that it will lead in a few years to de facto changes in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that he will be able to have this kind of independent Republika Srpska within Bosnia and Herzegovina.
So how serious is the situation that we're actually seeing right now?
I see it as a quite serious crisis. We have a very assertive Russia that's trying to influence us with the region, and it's actually exercising a great influence in the region. We have a Serbia that's seeing their EU perspective as of fading away, and is trying actually to situate itself as a regional geopolitical axis in the Western Balkans.
Is someone else from outside encouraging these forces to cause this political crisis?
The ruling elite from the Republika Srpska wouldn't have any, actually, I would say, means to bring this crisis at this level without the support from the outside. And having in mind the recent meetings between the leader of the main political party in Republika Srpska and the foreign minister of Russian Federation and the Serb president, and the fact that they are not actually speaking up against intentions of the ruling political elites from Serb entity in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I'm pretty sure that he has at least their latent support for doing this.
A series of past political crises has left Bosnia and Herzegovina facing some of its worst instability since the war. I wanted to know how it's affecting the economy.
Okay, you have just a different sauces that we put inside.
Meet Almir Mukacha. He's a local entrepreneur. Last year, he launched a business with a friend, and he seems to be doing well.
This is one of the things that the politicians are using, especially to get the votes, since next year we have elections. This negative rhetoric that's being used by some of the politicians is actually gaining themselves votes. That's the thing, to stay in power or to win new power. My personal example is actually that it doesn't affect me at all. I'm opening now 2 shops. Even there, someone say it's a crisis or something. Dude, we had the best season ever. Even comparing to 2019, this summer season was like more than 50% better than in 2019. So what is telling you that people are doing the business, people are continuing to live, and this temporary crisis that is happening is being felt from the 95 till now. I think it's just words. It's really just words.
But Dodik's statements are fueling concerns about another armed conflict. There is no shortage of fear-mongering in local media, which is causing anxiety. Even peace slogans have sprung up around the city to diffuse tensions. But is Bosnia really on the brink of war?
We should try not to scare the people, but at the same time, we shouldn't underestimate the situation. So it's always important to have actually real approach to the entire situation, to balance between how the situation is serious, what are the trends, are they leading really towards the war? They are certainly leading towards a conflict, and it could be only a political conflict that might be at one point stopped by the internationals, by the international community.
It's not the first time Dodik has wanted to cut ties with the rest of Bosnia. His separatist aspirations have characterized his policies for the past decade. Now they're gathering momentum.
When we look at how the EU is behaving in this crisis, we'll look at the team that the Biden administration is sending here, and they are also not really understanding what are the priorities.
So how do you think this political crisis will resolve in the end?
In the end, we probably will stay in a kind of limbo, that the Assembly of Republika Srpska is going to adopt these laws on intelligence agency, on armed forces, but they are not going to be actually established in full sense.
So Dodik seems set to keep discrediting the Bosnian state he represents. But the question is, will the US, NATO, or other officials in the West step in before things reach breaking point? Aksel Zaimovic, TRT World, Sarajevo.
Another country facing political upheaval is North Macedonia. Prime Minister Zoran Zaev stepped down after his party lost several cities in local elections, including the mayor's race in the capital Skopje.
Почитувани граѓани, дозволете и јас од името на СДСМ и сите наши луѓе да им честитам на нашите опоненти победата на овие локални избори. Ја превземам одговорноста на себе за ваквиот развој на политичките настани, заклучно со резултатите на овие избори. Поднесувам оставка од премиер и од председател на Социјалдемократскиот сојуз на Македонија.
His resignation follows months of declining popularity for Zaev as he struggled to keep the economy afloat during the pandemic. But it wasn't just COVID, but also controversy over the country's stalled accession to the European Union. However, that has largely been out of North Macedonia's hands. Neighbouring Bulgaria has been blocking North Macedonia's EU accession talks, citing disputes over its history, language and identity, which it insists have Bulgarian roots. Bulgaria, too, is heading to the polls next weekend for the third time this year. At the recent EU Western Balkans summit, Bulgaria's president said Sofia may let North Macedonia's EU talks proceed if Skopje stops, quote, erasing Bulgarian identity in the country. Let's take a closer look at their long-standing dispute.
The future of North Macedonia is in the European Union. We want you by our side.
Despite assurances from Brussels, North Macedonia's formal approval to begin accession talks is still blocked, and the country has already paid a high price in trying to join the club. After a long-lasting dispute with Greece, the country even changed its name. And after Athens finally lifted its veto back in 2018, another neighbour, Bulgaria, imposed a new roadblock. This one has to do with identity. Bulgaria insists that Macedonia's history and language have Bulgarian roots. The view in Sofia is that the Macedonian language does not exist. It's just a standardized version of a Bulgarian dialect.
Не може да се опитваш да изграждаш идентичност на една държава, която започва да съществува реално. Никога преди това не е съществувала преди 1944 година.
But Skopje has rejected compromising over such sensitive issues. In July, North Macedonia's parliament adopted so-called red lines, which are supposed to define the borders of identity talks with Bulgaria. They insist on an equal footing during the negotiations and the establishment of non-negotiable identity-related topics. There have been some attempts to find a solution. In 2017, the two countries signed a friendship treaty. Skopje says it will include Bulgarians in the constitution, but only if they make progress in their path to the EU. Meanwhile, Bulgaria is set to hold its third election this year, after two unsuccessful attempts to form a government. And the dispute with North Macedonia is often used during election campaigns.
Ще направим всичко възможно да изпратим мъж и жена, които да бъдат първите български астронавти в НАСА. Ще направим всичко възможно и към тях да се присъедини и един северно-македонски астронавт.
The statement angered Skopje and deepened the row.
Ние сме македонци. Ние зборуваме македонски јазик и затоа јас очекувам да се коригира.
Local media even went so far as to say that Bulgaria is not ready to take North Macedonia into the EU, but is ready to take it into space.
Веројатно нашите внуци ќе треба да формираат нова комисија која што ќе треба да утврди кој прв стапнал во Вселената, дали се тоа нашите или вашите астронаути.
The recent EU Western Balkans summit was a chance for the sides to reconcile. However, despite the high-level meetings, Bulgaria did not change its stance.
Те не се интегрират пълноценно в Република Северна Македония редом с другите части от народи. Ние няма как да кажем да на този за начало на преговори.
In spite of the stern tone, he added that work on a bilateral protocol could make Sofia lift its veto in the near future. Bulgaria's former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has said if he wins elections in November, he will support the EU membership. Perhaps there is still light at the end of the tunnel for North Macedonia, the country tested like no other candidate.
To tackle the dispute, I've invited guests from both countries onto the show. From Bulgaria's capital is Anton Panchev. He is an assistant professor in Balkan studies at Sofia University. And from North Macedonia's capital is political analyst Petar Arsovski. He is polling expert based in Skopje. Okay, Petar, let me start with you, having in mind all these latest developments in Skopje. How will this government even function now following Zoran Zaev's resignation?
Well, things get pretty blurry from now on. There are four possible options that can happen. One is that Prime Minister Zaev leaves and the same majority in parliament remains. The second is a wide government or national technical government. The third option is that the current opposition creates a parliamentary majority. And the fourth, of course, is snap elections. The question now becomes when these snap elections can take place, bearing in mind that there is an imminent election in Bulgaria and the possibility of a dispute resolution in December.
Right. And what kind of an impact on the election results had the EU's decision not to start the negotiations with North Macedonia yet because of the dispute with Bulgaria? And if the VMRO returns to power, if they manage to create a new majority in parliament, having in mind their nationalistic views, what kind of an approach will North Macedonia take in the future negotiations with Bulgaria particularly?
The results are pretty obvious in that the fact that the failed negotiations, the failed start of the IGC and the failed promises by the EU to start negotiations have had an impact on Zoran Zaev's rating and his credibility with the people. It is apparent that there's a disappointment and a bit of a dissatisfaction with the negligence that people perceive here from the EU. At the same time, there seems to be a wide consensus among the international community and the domestic political elites that this government, in spite of its failed start of negotiations, is the best probability of resolution with Bulgaria and has the best probability of starting the negotiations if that happens following the elections in Bulgaria.
Right. Anton, let's go back to the dispute. Why are Bulgarians so determined to continue with its language and identity dispute with North Macedonia? I mean, even some experts on Western Balkans history have some difficulties to understand what is the issue all about. Explain to us, please.
It's simple. Serbia has committed genocide against Bulgarians in Northern Macedonia during the end of the World War II, and we are protecting our identity, our language, and we want justice for the victims of communism. We want the full restoration of the Bulgarian cultural heritage there, and we are protecting the European values because there is mass falsification, there is repressing the people with preserved Bulgarian self-conscience. There are so many examples for blatant racism. We are described like Tatars, Mongols, Turks, like primitives, like tramps, wanderers, etc. We are proud of our Turkic ancestry because we know that all Bulgarians have been a very important part from the Turkic world in the Middle Ages, and we can't accept, it's not acceptable a member candidate for the EU is using such a racist, hate of speech, etc. Is not acceptable.
Petar, do you want to jump in? How is this stance being perceived in Skopje?
As usual, we have let in the Balkans history become a trap for the future. I understand the comments that my colleague is saying. However, it is very difficult. North Macedonia is a very difficult target on to accuse on lack of minority rights or discrimination against minorities based on its track record with the Albanian, Turk, and other minorities in the country being part of the government, etc. Especially, it is difficult to target North Macedonia as somebody who's pushing against minority rights from Bulgaria, who has failed to register even organizations of minorities after 16 verdicts by the European Court of Justice. So I don't think this is a narrative that will fare well with the international community. And in fact, 26 member countries of the EU are against this narrative, and Bulgaria is under a lot of international pressure. So I don't think that this sells well. We'll see what happens in the future. Of course, we need to enter into open negotiations with a goodwill from both sides to reach some sort of good compromise on what is perceived by Bulgaria as historical revisionism in North Macedonia. But this current narrative doesn't fare well.
Right. Seems like Sofia is not backing down. Anton, the new round of talks will be based on this bilateral protocol that contains 6 points of contention. How difficult will it be to get agreement finally on this and leave this behind?
So, Bulgaria's position is not going to change after the parliamentary and presidential elections on the 14th of November, unless North Macedonia is not ready to apply the good neighborly agreement and to respect its commitment. Because we are protecting our identity and the fundamental values of the European Union, like mutual respect, adherence to the objective truth, etc. Because Bulgaria's policy does not depend on which parliament or government will be in power. We are strong, united to protect our interests.
Right. So the upcoming elections will probably not change Bulgaria's position, as you were saying, Anton. Now, Petar, but in Macedonia, in North Macedonia, things might change now following Zaev's resignation. Can and will Skopje meet those demands that we were just mentioning? And will North Macedonia name ethnic Bulgarians in its constitution? Zaev said they will, but after the country start accession talks. So where are we at this point?
As a symbolic point of view, I think that it is very important that all minorities are respected, even within the constitution, but of both countries. I think that if we accept a standard that minorities should be named in the constitution as to protect their cultural heritage, this should apply across both borders, in North Macedonia and in Bulgaria as well. And this is a human standard of human rights that is widely accepted. As far as the 5 points are concerned, I think that it's not my feeling from the current political elites that it's not the content that is in dispute so much. I think the content is something that can be entered into real negotiations. It's more the political will by Bulgaria to really open the negotiations this time. As you remember, they've backed away a couple of times from a done deal, first in Berlin, then with the Portuguese proposal. And now there's a real question with the political elites in the country whether Bulgaria is presenting a moving target on this. Because first it was the language and the identity, then it was the history, then the cultural commission, and now it's minorities. So the real fear, if I can name it that, here is whether there is a genuine will to at all talk about these 5 points. The content is not so much in dispute.
Anton, is there a will to talk about these 6 points, in your opinion?
We hope, but I must declare that Bulgaria is not disputing the right of self-determination of our neighboring country, neither their right to call their language as they like. But we insist that Skopje comply with the modern European standards and stop, not only stop destroying and falsifying our cultural heritage, but also to stop persecuting its citizens with preserved Bulgarian national conscience. This is the main topic now. They have to change their textbooks, their academic books, and etc. to build a real partnership.
Right, so obviously both Skopje and Sofia are still far away from reaching the deal. We've seen that also during that summit in Slovenia just recently. Everyone expected breakthrough. Nothing was achieved again. So let me ask you both my final question. Anton, first to you. Is it time for the EU to step up its efforts to resolve the dispute? Because obviously the two countries can't do it by themselves.
Look, we can resolve that dispute immediately. It's enough they to change their textbooks to show a single authentic document source that there are mentioned Macedonian people or Macedonian state during the Middle Ages, during the Ottoman rules. That's impossible. They just to react, and I believe that in Skopje, very wrongly had relied on the expectation that Bulgaria would be pressed and change its position. That's impossible.
Okay, Petar, same question to you. Can the EU do something when it comes to this dispute?
It's going to be difficult. The fact of the matter is that Bulgaria is isolated in its position, and the remaining 26 member countries of the EU don't accept the position of Bulgaria or claim that this is a tantrum, basically. It's going to be difficult to push the negotiations unless the EU steps up its game to a significant degree. But I don't see that as a very realistic probability within the short period of time, especially because North Macedonia is entering a period of political instability.
Okay, thank you both for joining us here on Across the Balkan, Anton Panchev and Petar Arsovski. I do appreciate your insights. And thanks for watching this episode of Across the Balkans. See you next time.